prepared to be. One day I saw an inspirational poster on a wall which said, "It's not about how good you are, it's about how good you want to be." I thought it was a wonderful saying aimed at motivating people to be the best they can be. As I reflected on the words on the poster, I began to feel there was something missing from the statement, a few words or a phrase that would give it even greater meaning and clarity. Then it came to me and I began to write. It's not about how good you are. It's not even about how good you want to be. It's about how good you are prepared to be to become how good you can be. How good are you prepared to be to achieve your weight and health goals? The essence of this adapted message was about commitment, discipline, and investment of time, all wrapped up in the knowledge that sacrifices must be made in pursuit of our endeavors. I have a saying, you cannot have it all in pursuit of it all. We live in what appears to be at times a get rich quick, have it all now culture, but that's if you believe the hype. Live your life not for today's immediate gratification, but for tomorrow's satisfaction. This way your efforts will be inspired by long-term thinking and include strategic planning instead of what I call sprinklings of thinking that include fast-track success strategies. You cannot become a good footballer without good training, or a good doctor without good study. Likewise, you cannot become good at striving to be the best you can be without good investment in yourself. You cannot achieve your weight and health goals without an investment of time and effort. As my youngest daughter used to eloquently put it, the gooder I become, Daddy, the better my schoolwork will be.
Good evening and welcome to this week's edition of Make Health Your Habit Live. This is a special edition this week because this week it's the women's room and I am the honorary man in the room this week, but we're talking about an incredibly important subject and it's kind of brought up so much debate. It's the subject that most women will go through and think about at various times in their life, and that is the menopause. There are 14 million days from a work perspective lost through the menopause today. So on the Make Health Your Habit show today, we are going to be talking all things menopause. Yes, good evening and welcome again to the Make Health Your Habit podcast live. Today is about all things menopause and it is the women's room. Now this is a normal backdrop I have and it's blue. And I thought because it's the women's room, I thought I think I really kind of need to switch it up a little bit. So this is my background for today. It's suitable for the women's room and we've got some fantastic guests up with us today who are going to share some tips and advice about understanding the menopause. And I've over the last few days I was doing some posts on social media and it's such a diverse subject and there are women going through it who don't understand it. There are women approaching it who are nervous about it and don't really understand it. So we hope at least in the show today that you may be able to gain something from the show, some greater understanding of something that affects all women and men. If you are watching this show, I hope you gain an understanding of what the woman in your life is or has to go through, because despite people in some corners will say that it's the menopause is psychosomatic and it's not real, it's 100% real, and what women suffer from is something that I don't think any man would ever want to go through. So without further ado, let me introduce to you our first guest, and that guest is Dr. Andleeb Ahmed. Good evening to you. Let me just take you off mute here. Good evening to you. How are you feeling, Dr. Andleeb?
I'm feeling a little bit nervous. Thank you for inviting me on your show.
It's wonderful that you've taken the time. Please just tell us a little bit about yourself, please.
So my name is Dr. Andleeb Ahmed. I'm a GP in London, mainly Northwest London. So my special interest is, women's health, elderly care, and adolescent mental health. I've been in the NHS for about 25 years, so there isn't much I haven't seen, but, general practice is always an eye-opener, particularly during this time. I'm also a health and inequalities champion, and I'm also chair of governors at a local free school.
Wonderful. Thank you very much for that introduction. Now, my second guest is a returnee. She was here a few weeks ago, well, about 6 weeks ago, done an excellent job when it comes to natural health. And, she's really passionate about helping people to improve their health. And I know she's going to add a lot of value to the show. Good evening, Connie, and welcome. How are you today?
I'm good. I'm very good. I'm excited to be on the show. So just a bit about me. I worked for an investment bank for the last 26 years, but 6 years ago, I had to change my health. And what I did with my husband, we went on a 28-day juice fast, and it totally changed our lives. So from then, it's catapulted me into researching and becoming a nutritional therapist. And I love it, helping people reset their health using the amazing foods God's given us. So that's me in a nutshell.
Wonderful, wonderful. Pleasure to have you back on the show, Connie. And our final guest is, again, another returnee. We did an excellent show. I think it was in November we'd done an excellent show. I'm really pleased that she's taken the time out to be on the show. Good evening to you, Marilyn. Good evening. How are you today?
Good evening. I'm fabulous, thank you. How are you?
I'm really, really good. Just tell us a little bit about yourself, Marilyn.
Now, this is one of those unusual ones where I'm not here in the capacity of what I'm normally around to do, but I am a coach and therapist. I've been a coach and therapist now for the past 20 years. Weirdly, when Connie was speaking, I actually was working in an investment bank and gave that up to study to be a chartered accountant because I was very quiet and very shy. Along the way, discovered personal development, so gave up the accountancy studies to become a coach and a hypnotherapist instead. And today I'm here both to learn and to share. And it almost feels like my second time around, because one of the reasons why I looked at changing my life more deeply was because I was having many of the symptoms that menopausal women are having in my 20s. And I realized that kind of working with my mindset and my emotions was one of the keys to changing that. So really excited to be here tonight, and thank you for the invitation.
Wonderful to have you. Now, normally at the beginning of the show, I do some hellos. I ask you to say some hellos wherever you are. But because we've got so much to pack into the show today, I thought I would leave that now. If you're watching it on Facebook, if you're watching on YouTube, use the chat, communicate with yourselves. So there's a chat there. You can comment between yourselves. Towards the end of the show, you'll have an opportunity to ask any of the guests any questions. But feel free to make a comment at any time using the chat. If there's possibly a relevant one that comes up, I've got it here on my left, and I can see the chats coming up, and I may just pose that question. But we're really going to try and leave the questions until the end. But if you have a burning question, you hear something and you think, yes, I really want the answer to that, just write something in the chat and I'll see if I can do it. Obviously, I had three ladies. I'm the honorary gentleman in the women's room. So I introduced myself last. I allowed them to introduce themselves. My name is Ken Barnes. I am known as the L.E.A.N MindBody Coach. And my job is two things I help people to do. I help people to lose weight, and I also help people to prevent diabetes. I've written a book called the L.E.A.N MindBody Method, and that has sold so well, and it's inspired so many people. So My main methodology of working is all about low carb nutrition, sleep, nutrition and exercise. But my strap line is about making health your habit. So this is what this show is about. It's about making health your habit. And I don't think of a better subject to help people to make health their habit. So yes, please engage in the chat. I can see a couple of you engaging in the chat now. I'll just say hello to a couple of people. I say hello to Nina and Wendy. Good evening to both of you. Thank you very much for starting the chat off today, because we want to get some conversation going. This is such an emotive issue, really. And as a man, I'm humbly blessed that I'm here to be able to learn. So let me just start here with Dr. Ahmed. And here is my first question that I would like to ask you today. And the first question is this, is what exactly is the menopause, Dr. Ali? What exactly is the menopause?
So the menopause is basically a normal aging process. A lot of women in general go through it between the ages of 45 to 55. The average age is 51. But like Marilyn commented on, some women actually go through the menopause very early, and that's known as premature menopause. And what tends to happen is your levels of hormone, estrogen and progesterone start naturally falling, and eventually your ovaries will stop producing an egg. And with that, once you have gone through a whole year without a period, you have officially entered the menopause. Now, before that, you get this time known as the perimenopause, and that's when you start developing all the symptoms.
So I think you kind of preempted the next question, because the next question I was going to ask you was really, what are the different stages of the menopause? Now, the perimenopause, and I read an official name, which was premature ovarian insufficiency, which was the medical name for that. How long does, people obviously know it as the perimenopause, how long does that last normally?
Right, so the perimenopause or the transitional menopause, it can last from anything for a few months to up to 4 to 5 years before you actually go through the menopause. So it can be a very, very long period. And I speak from experience because I have started going through the perimenopause myself. So I'm 50 and I started, I actually started pre-lockdown, just the month before lockdown. And I started noticing the symptoms. And I popped in to see my GP, and he just, went through all the symptoms, and I sort of knew anyway, but as doctors, we're terrible at going to the doctors for ourselves.
Okay, yeah.
And did a blood test, and then, that's when we found out.
Yeah. It was a question I was going to ask you, just to share with us your own personal experience of going through the menopause. How if you just listen up to, you said you just started this year, what would you say your own person, if you just sit down with a friend and describe it to a friend, how would you describe your personal experience of starting either the peri or the menopause?
If I'm really honest, it's quite scary, because it's sort of, when you start your periods, it's sort of like the mark of you're becoming a woman. And then as you start going through this process, you feel sort of, I don't know if it's such a word, but you start feeling, I'm not that person anymore. You feel less of a woman. I know it's really silly to say that, but as how I started feeling, and you sort of realize you're approaching that stage in your life where, you're not going to be able to have children eventually, and it's sort of trying to come to terms with it, and it's a sort of bereavement in a way, and I think that's the only way I could honestly describe it, and also very frustrating. So,
on the post on Facebook, there was a woman who actually described it in the same way, and she was quite frustrated. And her words were that her ability to have children was taken away without her choice. So she was incredibly frustrated about that. Connie, tell us, what is your personal experience about going through the menopause?
To be honest, I couldn't wait. I know it sounds really weird. The reason I couldn't wait was because my menstrual cycle was very, very heavy, and it led to me being severely anemic. So when it started to happen, I noticed the infrequencies of my cycle, and I thought, okay, great, this is it. But the negative side was that I witnessed my mum going through the menopause, and I was thinking, I don't want to be like that, because my mum would just break out in the sweats and mood swings and would have to fan her and so forth. But my mum's one was brought on by surgery. So, you know, if my mum knew what we know now, that may not have happened. But yeah, I'm embracing it. I see it as a new chapter in my life. I'm looking forward to it. The thing that's getting me now is the hot flushes. And how I can describe to the men, if there's any men watching this, is that it's like you've got all your clothes on and you go straight into a sauna. Just as quickly as you were cold, and you go straight into the sauna and you get hot. That is how the flashes are. But they go quickly. But I will touch on what we can do with regards to essential oils and vitamins to help combat that. But me personally, I'm embracing it, and I'm looking forward to it being finished with. So that's me.
Yeah, that's a very honest account there of your experience. So Marilyn, tell us, what was your personal experience about the menopause?
Well, for me, I have to say it was a bit of a shock, because it was about 6 weeks after my 50th birthday. I remember I was lying in bed. It was a really hot summer's day 2 years ago. And it was one of those days we're having like 28, 29 degrees. And suddenly, out of nowhere, I was just soaking wet. I mean, like sweating. And I was like, I know it's hot outside, but this is crazy. And then it just stopped. And then I was shivering. And I'm like, okay, now this is bonkers, because it's boiling out there. And then suddenly my mind was like, oh my gosh, could it be? Because I actually thought I would start the menopause, 55, 60, 50 felt very young for me. And so it's like, whoa, what's going on here? And it just took a bit of adjustment. And then I started to wonder, how is it that nobody's been talking about this? Because a bit like Connie was saying, if I were trying to describe, and I remember having lunch with one of my male friends, and I said, it's like the gates of hell open up, and it just rains that heat down upon you from nowhere. Like sweat was dripping off my eyebrows, it was dripping off the end of my nose. And I'm like, how is it people haven't been speaking about this? And then I realized, and we'll probably touch on this later, that people had been suffering in silence and hiding and retreating from social love and not talking about it.
Yeah, that actually did come up in the conversations, that some people just actually hid the fact that they were suffering from the menopause, whether it was embarrassment or whatever. But possibly we could get onto that, the kind of, the psychological side of it, because I think that's just as important as the physical side of it. So, Dr. Ahmed, please tell us, what are the symptoms of the menopause? Because I think, is it the same as the perimenopause? Are there different symptoms? What are the symptoms that a woman would have to look out for to be able to recognize? And then if she is then getting the symptoms, what is the next process to be able to confirm that she's either in the perimenopause or the menopause?
I think the thing with the perimenopause and the menopause is quite a fluid process. The first thing that you will experience in the perimenopause is the regular period. And you start noticing that they are either less frequent or more frequent, they get lighter or they get heavier. And then what happens is you after the start. So you start getting the hot flushes, the mood swings, the irritability, anger, loss of memory, the general dryness, low libido or sex drive. Those sort of main things. Other managers is your hair starting to sting or loss of hair. There's so many symptoms to remember. And your skin becomes much more dry. But that's really much it in that film.
Okay, so those are the symptoms of the menopause. The echo will go in a moment. I've just got to make a little adjustment. Did you recognize those? Did you recognize those symptoms, Connie?
I couldn't really hear them,
but
majority of them. I recognise the hot ones. Not so much the mood swings now, but before I was telling Ken, my husband and myself had a lovely discussion, and it was heated on my end. And I remember saying to myself, Connie, just shut up. Because I was getting on my nerves, and that's because the hormonal imbalance with the estrogen, progesterone, and so forth. So, hair is fine for me, skin is fine for me, but there are things that happen in a woman's body once estrogen stops being produced that makes it unstable, makes it unbalanced. So, the joys of menopause.
Dr. L.E.A.N, I'm going to come back to you. Could you just quickly repeat the symptoms of the menopause, because they didn't hear?
Yeah, it's fine. So the first thing you'll notice in the perimenopause, most women notice are irregular periods. They become heavier or lighter, more frequent or less frequent. And then, as Marilyn and Connie have both said, you start getting the hot flushes, the night sweats, the mood swings, loss of memory, irritability, loss of libido, which the lack of sex drive, and also your breasts can become quite tender, and then they start to sag as well because of the loss of increase in fatty tissue, because your glandular tissue becomes reduced. And other things you may notice are the skin becomes drier, your hair may start falling out. I mean, those are not so common. The ones I mentioned before are far more common, and vaginal dryness is a particular problem as well. Sounds great, doesn't it?
It does. Do you recognise those symptoms, Marilyn?
Thankfully, I recognise most of them from reading about them. And I can definitely hear a bit of feedback and echo on my side as well. I don't know if other people can hear that, but I recognise the symptoms from reading about them. For me, it's mainly been the hot flushes, the night sweats. I'm not aware of the mood swings, etc. Thankfully, touch wood. Having already gone bald once in my life in my 20s, I'm really hoping my hair remains intact. I would say of all the symptoms, aside from the hot flushes and the night sweats, the one I would say I recognise most is my skin is a bit drier than it previously has been. But thankfully, I haven't noticed the other symptoms, and I'm hoping that's because they're not going to be present. I can report back in a year or two and we'll see, but fingers crossed. It's just what I've talked about so far that are the main ones for me.
So, Dr. L.E.A.N, there are so many symptoms that women suffer with having in the menopause, and they're unbearable. From what I have read, it's unbearable to varying degrees with some women. And some women choose to go down a kind of a natural route, which we'll talk about in a moment. But then some women also choose hormone replacement therapy. Could you just tell us, what is hormone replacement therapy?
Sure. So, as the name suggests, you're replacing the hormones that you are naturally losing. So there, you can either have HRT, which is both estrogen and progesterone, and that tends to be for women who have a uterus, or you can just have estrogen only treatment, which is for women who've had a hysterectomy. And the HRT comes in various forms. They come in creams, in patches, in tablets. So there's various forms to try. But before we start, HRT, a woman first obviously needs to be diagnosed. So it tends to be from the symptoms, and then we may organize a blood test. We'd want to make sure that it's nothing that's mimicking menopause. So there are some, conditions that we have to rule out first. Even something such as, an underactive thyroid could mimic, menopausal symptoms. So that's why it's important to go and see your doctor. And then we would have a discussion with the women, because not HRT doesn't suit all women. And there are some women who we wouldn't give HRT to, especially those women who've had a family history or have had a history of breast cancer, and who have a high risk of, for instance, having clots. So we have, you have to be assessed. And there are alternatives to HRT as well. And obviously a woman needs to make an informed decision as to going on to HRT.
So the two hormones that is estrogen and progesterone, and
that's right.
And that's it. They are reduced in when a woman starts to go through a menopause. So tell me, why is it that HRT has such a bad rap?
The reason HRT has such a bad rap is there was research to suggest that HRT increases the risk of breast cancer. So this is why, since the study came out, we changed our practice. So there were the days where women used to be on HRT for years and years and years and years endlessly. And now what we do is we basically prescribe it for the time to cover the symptoms. And, I would try and aim to put my ladies on HRT for the shortest time possible, because the longer you're on HRT, obviously the risk goes up very slightly. And that's why, we wouldn't give HRT to women who have a high risk of breast cancer. So that is why it has got a bit of a bad press. But, you need to remember it's also protective. It protects your bones, reduces the risk of osteoporosis, which the risk increases once you go through the menopause. And also it reduces, your risk, there's other risks it reduces as well. So it's an informed decision between the doctor and the patient. So I always give my ladies lots of information to read.
So when it comes to about a risk of cancer, you talk about women who have that BRCA gene 1 and the BRCA gene 2. Are they at the most risk when it comes to HRT?
I didn't quite hear you, sorry.
Are the women who have the BRCA gene 1 and the BRCA gene 2 who have got a history of cancer, are they the people that are most at risk from breast cancer with HRT?
Yes, we would strongly advise against prescribing HRT. It would be contraindicated in those ladies.
Connie.
Hi. Can't hear you.
Connie, I know you have a different methodology when it comes to managing the menopause. You have a more natural kind of route. Yeah. And, they both have their pros and cons. Tell us, we're here to have a debate and everything. First of all, just tell us your opinion on HRT, and then tell us why you prefer to go down the more natural route.
Yeah, it was interesting what Dr. Ahmed said, because I sort of steered away, and any clients I would sort of steer them away from that. But it's nice to understand the dosage and things can change. Because even though I'm going through and I'm progressing in the menopause, there are lots of women who their whole life has been changed, totally turned upside down. And especially in the winter period, and you're going through this, you could feel depressed and so forth. So my how I look at it is that our bodies are natural, and God's given us things that we can take which can help balance out our hormones. As Dr. Ahmed was saying, how important our hormones are. So I would look at essential oils, and I would also look at vitamins, because we need to absorb more. We're getting older, so we need to absorb more, and we're not getting it necessarily from the food. So you can have a look at vitamins and supplementing with vitamins. And there's a range from A to K2. So the B vitamins are really important. So things like forgetfulness, taking vitamin A, vitamin B1, dry skin, vitamin A, memory loss, vitamin E and K2 for the bones, cardiovascular. So there's a full spectrum of vitamins that we can be taking to supplement whilst we're going through this period. The other part I look at is essential oils, and they are amazing. I remember being introduced to essential oils, and they put a few drops in a tissue, and I breathed it in, and it was like, I shouldn't say this, but I've never been, well, regarding being high, it was just gave me an overall sensation of being happy. And that was just from the essential oil, the aroma of the essential oil. So during menopause, perimenopause, we can look at essential oils like clary sage. That helps with the hot flashes. It helps with your mood swing and so forth. Peppermint oil. When I got together with women, I would show them how they could just put peppermint oil into a bottle, shake it up, and just spray it. Anytime you're having that hot flush, just spray it, and it will cool you right down. The other things are lavender, things that help your mood, help you to get focused again. So there's a full spectrum of other things that we can do, but I don't promote. I'm not a doctor, so I wouldn't promote that, but I don't say women don't have that, because it could work for them. Also, something important about the food. If we have too much sugar in our food, it does help to increase the hot flashes. So yeah, just looking at your food and what you eat. So
yeah, the sugar aspect is definitely something that we're going to talk about a little bit later on. Marilyn, you've heard about the natural process, and you've heard Dr. Ahmed talk about the HRT. What are your thoughts on how you would deal with the process of menopause you're going through?
Well, I'll be honest with you, because of and we'll just take it back to sort of 25 or so years ago when I did my intro. I said I had many of the symptoms that would mimic the men, down to a number one buzz cut. And this is all my natural hair and it's all homegrown. I had really bad skin, so dry, I was almost covered in eczema. Fainting, dizzy spells, and that is when my doctor diagnosed me with what was suspected to be onset early Alzheimer's. And all of that was, let me just put it this way, a very overzealous doctor who destroyed my thyroid gland. So what Dr. Andleeb was saying was absolutely correct, is when I was then looking at the symptoms of menopause 2 years ago, I'm like, oh my goodness, I've been through a lot of this already. And it was due to the medical profession, let me say. That's how I ended up in that position. So I am one of those people who's not necessarily rushing forwards for more drugs and medication, because I've been on the receiving end of that and saw the kind of devastation it then wrought on my whole body and my mind. So if I were going to be doing something, I guess I would be naturally, first of all, looking at the natural side of things and what you can do there. Now, luckily, I discovered, let's say, the essential oils and aromatherapy oils, gosh, where are we now? Probably about 22, 23 years ago. And so I've been using those ever since. So it's kind of part of my daily life. So my first, and if I really had to go down the medical route, one of the things that a friend told me about a few years ago, and I'd be interested in the doctor's view, she was talking about bioidenticals, for example. But my first my first port of call is always, what can I do within myself? And are there things that I can change and adjust? And then what can I do in terms of what I'm ingesting and what I'm actually physically putting into my body? So the food, etc. What am I putting on my body? Because the skin is such a massive organ, and there can be lots of chemicals that we are ingesting without even realizing it. And so my first port of call is always, what can I do naturally with regards to my mind and with regards to how I kind of take in my nutrition, before I would then start looking at the medical side of it. But I guess one of the questions I also have, if we're going to get a few in as we go into the next segment, is, okay, actually being low on estrogen and progesterone, that can't be a good thing as we're living longer. So are the herbs and nutritional supplements enough to give the body what it needs? But I'm kind of natural first, and then if I need to, then I would maybe do some research and look at the medical side.
Okay. I know that for me, I mean, as a self, I'm an advocate of natural, but I know, especially with doing research, cardiovascular benefits, I'm sure Dr. Ahmed will reaffirm that. But one of the things that came up in a question and also in my research, Dr. Ahmed, was the bleeding from HRT. And I know that definitely frightened a number of women. So could you just tell us why bleeding happens on hormone replacement therapy?
It's basically because your levels of hormones are naturally going down, and so you're reintroducing the hormone back into your body. I'm echoing again, by the way. So it's very similar to when some women start the contraceptive pill, and we notice that some women do have bleeding while they're on the pill, and it tends to take about 3 to 6 months for it to settle down. And the women who do experience a bit of bleeding on HRT, it takes time for it to settle down. And there are different preparations of HRT you can obviously have. So you can have, the ones that will give you a period, so the bleed HRT, and then there's the non-bleed HRT. But depending on where a woman is in her menstrual cycle and how long she's been without having a bleed, that would decide which one we would prescribe the patient. But I just wanted to also say, I'd like to reassure viewers that the majority of general doctors now would actually sit down with their patient and not actually go straight to HRT. I'm actually one of the doctors that would look at lifestyle first and see what I can tell my patient to do naturally or of her own accord. And HRT is just one of the treatments for the menopause. It's not the be-all and end-all, but it's obviously quite important because it does have a lot of protective factors.
So the women should definitely not be frightened.
No, definitely not. I mean, thankfully, things have changed quite a lot. So the way we're trained now, and the amount of information we have as well. I would often sit my patient down, first reassure her. I think that's really important, is to reassure the patient that you don't have to suffer. You don't have to suffer in silence. We're here to support you. There's lots of organizations that you can join to help you, and what symptoms are particularly bothering you. And then we can work through what natural things they can do, what they can change in their lifestyle, in their diet, to help combat those symptoms. So it isn't always, give the patient some tablets and bye-bye. I'm not like that. So, there's absolutely nothing to be scared of. And we do respect our patients' decisions. There has to be autonomy of, and I hope women who are listening, who may have been a bit worried, do go and see your GP and do go and talk to them. You might be surprised.
Thank you for that. Thank you for because that came out very, very strong, that women were really, really concerned about the HRT, and you've given some validation there as well. So we've spoken about the hormone replacement, and obviously such a big subject. I mean, we can only kind of touch on certain things where hopefully women can go out and do their research themselves. But there's another side, as well as the physical side, there is the mental side. And, you know, my research in the matter told me that CBT, cognitive behavioral therapy, and other mental strategies are being used more and more for women to be able to cope with the psychological side of going through the menopause. Marilyn, what's your thoughts on how a woman's mindset in when she's going through the menopause?
Absolutely. I would say for me, this is a big piece. And, just take it back a few years when I struggled through all of those symptoms. It culminated in September 2000, where I actually contemplated, and I can hear myself feedback with them, so I hope you guys can hear me, where I contemplated suicide. Because I couldn't take it anymore. It's like I can't. I'm changed. I went from a size 8 to a size 16 within a couple of weeks. My skin was terrible. I was bald. My nails were very brittle and really didn't have any. And everything, palpitations, the faint. Literally, I'd be walking down Oxford Street and I just faint, just slam, hit the floor. And I thought, I cannot take this anymore. It coincided with me accidentally signing up for a personal development workshop. I thought I was signing up for a communication skills course because I was very quiet and very shy. And it turned out to be a whole range of other things that one or two I'd heard of hypnosis, but my view of hypnosis was a guy on a stage making somebody hop on one leg and bark like a dog. So I wasn't that impressed. Also, seriously, I'm not kidding you. There was something called timeline therapy, which I'd absolutely never heard of, and something called HUNA, H-U-N-A. Hadn't heard of any of these things, but they kept talking about the mind-body connection, and how important it was, and how you could also influence what was going on within your physical body by changing what was going on within your mind. And so sitting there in my suicidal state, it was basically a case of, because I'd only gone to get a refund, it's a very long story, but I was like, okay, I'm going to prove to you this is nonsense, that it doesn't work. Put your money where your mouth is. I'm going to do everything you're talking about. I will prove to you that this cannot possibly help me in the state that I'm in. And it was a 7-day training. By the end of the 7 days, the best thing I can say is I was completely transformed. And I was like, oh my goodness. And I went from someone who had chronic fatigue. I had, for the past 3 or so years, been so tired, I was sleeping 12 to 15 hours a day. Once I started to get a handle on my mindset and what I was thinking and how I was perceiving things, to this day, 20 years later, people still call me the Duracell bunny, because they're like, whoa, where'd you get the energy from? And that all changed in the blink of an eye. And I remember the moment sitting in that room, literally looking at my own thoughts, recalling what I say to myself, and then thinking, hold on a minute, what would happen if I change that dialogue? And what would happen if I change the beliefs that are associated with that dialogue? And in that moment, in October 2000, everything changed. And since then, that's why I was like, whoa, I'm giving up the accountancy studies. I'm going to be a hypnotherapist instead, because it blew my mind that we could have such an impact on our physical body just by what we're thinking and what we believe. So yes, I'm definitely an advocate for the mindset, and that changed everything. And I went from contemplating suicide one week to literally like bouncing around like Tigger the next, going, whoa, life is amazing. So, I'm a fan.
So here's a question, and this comes from a man's perspective. I was told to ask if there's because one of the major issues with the menopause is the mood swings, and I was told to ask, do women have control or a level of control over the mood swing? Connie, do women have a level of control over the mood swings during menopause?
It depends on what day it is, what time. But I do remember saying to my husband, when I felt the change happening and I wasn't as bubbly as I was, and I was like, help me, what's going on? You might not recognize it. You might think you're depressed or there's something wrong. But actually, it's the body trying to tell you and speak to you that something's not right. So if you are going through, like, you know, you're feeling depressed, you're feeling not yourself, not 100%, your body is trying to speak to you. And as Dr. Ahmed said, you can get a blood test done to see what levels of estrogen, progesterone, testosterone is in your blood and so forth. There's also another test that you can get, which is the saliva test, to see what levels your hormones are at. But yeah, do we know it's happening? Yes and no. If you do your research and think this isn't me, what's going on? You might think, okay, what age am I? What age did my mum go through the menopause, or your sisters, or so forth? And then you start questioning yourself: is this me? I know I've changed. So that's like little red flags for you to say, okay, go and get checked out, go and see what's going on. And there's hope at the end of the day. You can, as we're here on the panel, we're going through menopause at different stages, but we're getting through it. And we can get through it together and talking about it. And that's why I really thank Ken for doing this. A brave man, Ken. But it's nice just to know that we can talk about it. Back in my mum's day, I didn't even know what menopause meant. All I knew that my mum was just sweating down the place, and I didn't understand the mood swings. But now I do, and I'm glad that we can speak about it because we can help one another. And what Marilyn was saying, it's true about the mindset. Try not to let it overtake you, the change that's going on in your body. But yeah, it's life, isn't it? It's life.
Which I just had a message through on the chat saying that question was just a man's question, but you know, I'm here in the women's room representing the men, and they have posed some questions, so I have to pose those questions because, you know, men also live with women going through the menopause, and there's an indirect and direct effect to them in a number of ways. So there's one or two questions I was kind of encouraged to ask, and that was one of the questions. We're talking about the symptoms. There's a lots of articles about what kind of exacerbates the menopause. Dr. Ahmed, what effect does alcohol have on alcohol and smoking? What effect does alcohol and smoking have on the menopause symptoms?
Well, you may or may not realize I don't drink alcohol, so that's I wouldn't know personally. But you know, the alcohol won't help with the hot flushes. That's for sure. I think in general, you know, there's not been. I mean, obviously, the thing with smoking is that it'll be one of the factors we consider in prescribing HRT. So it's about the general lifestyle changes. You know, reducing the amount of alcohol you take will help you feel your well-being, improve your well-being, and obviously stop smoking. It just goes without saying, it has a numerous beneficial effects. I can understand why people may feel, you know, having a glass of wine, you know, obviously, if some people find that half a glass of wine helps them, that's all well and good. However, excessive drinking, using it as a coping mechanism will not help. And obviously, smoking, some people might find that it's calming them down, but the negative effects of the nicotine, etc., will be harming them. So I just wanted to go back to something that you said about, you know, is there any warning about the mood swings? I just wanted to say two things. I remember my mum going through the menopause, and I didn't realize it was the menopause then. I remember her having these outbursts of anger where she would literally get a slipper and chase me around the room for no reason. I didn't do anything. And that was, I realized now, was her going through the menopause and all these hot flushes. Whether you, and from someone who's noticed quite severe mood swings, you do notice that you're more emotional and get more worked up, but you don't have any control over it. However, what I started doing is being more mindful of that fact. I mean, mindfulness is a huge thing now. And I know that I sometimes just need to step away and I'm quite open with my family. I've got 3 young boys, they're young adolescents, and I've told them I'm going through the perimenopause, and this is what's going to be happening. And I think if you're open and you tell your family, they know. And they know that just leave mum alone, and I'll be quite honest with them. So I think that does help with the mood swings aspect of it.
So the question really is there some, God, don't beat me up, ladies, don't beat me up, I know I'm treading on dangerous ground here. Is there some form of control that women can exercise when it comes to the mood swing? That's the question. Or should men just take it? And yeah.
No, I don't think there's any control over it, because when it comes, it's like a tsunami. That's the only way I can describe it. I don't think you have a control of stopping it coming, but there's a way of managing it while it's happening.
Okay, well, that's fair. That's fair enough. We can live with that. So there's a way of managing it. I'm going to go now to a couple of viewer questions. When I was posting it on, well, Nina says no. Well, there's a couple of questions that I took off my post off Facebook. So we're going to run through a few of them, and it's quite apt. So this was the first question, and this is what came in, and she said. I think I'm going through it now. I'm getting very angry very quickly. Apparently, it's a symptom, which is obviously quite apt considering we're talking about that. So as far as she's concerned, that getting angry, well, she said very angry is a symptom. So I think we dealt with that question. Let's move on to the next one, which I saw, which was she's still going through the menopause 11 years on. Does the menopause, in your experience, your friend, whatever, do you have friends that have had menopause going on for many, many, many years?
I definitely, I spoke to someone about 3-4 weeks ago. She's 81 years old and is still going through it. We were all horrified because it was a discussion about the menopause. Like, we've got Dr. Ahmed here, we had a doctor there, and the doctor immediately said, please go and get help, because going through that for 30 years, 30, it is just too many. I've got another friend, but hers was surgically induced, and she's been going through it now for about 25 years. So I hope that those are very, very special cases. And I hope Dr. Ahmed can maybe enlighten us, but I'd love it to just be the 2 or 3 years and then you're done. But I'd love to hear a view on that one for sure as well.
So, Dr. Ahmed, what is there an average time that women go through the menopause?
I think the average time, I would say, is about 8 years. But some women are lucky enough to go through it only for a few months. I hate those women. And then there's some women who've gone through it are still going through it 20 years later. So I just wanted to touch on the lady who said that she's getting very, very angry very, very quickly. We have to remember that we're currently, a lot of mental health issues have been brought about by lockdown, and I'm seeing a lot of depression and anxiety. So, extreme anger can be related to that, if it's that in isolation. So if she is finding that, I would go and have a chat with her GP.
Connie, do you know people that have gone through the menopause for a very, very long time?
It was just my mum. Just my mum. But you know how you said one of the questions came from the men? So if the men are living with women and they know that they have changed with their mood swings, you can help the women in your lives by being understanding, not condescending or taking the mickey. Oh, it's the menopause. Oh, is it a hot flash? But being understanding and helping them go through it. So just to be sympathetic, to understand that this is something totally new for us. So we've got to get used to it, just like the guys have got to get used to it. So
That's fair enough. I'm just representing here, ladies. I'm just representing. I have to represent. Dr. Ahmed, there was one comment that was kind of a little bit, to some people, it was kind of disturbing, and it was this. It said, the one comment was that some male GPs are not taking the symptoms seriously.
Mm-hmm.
Is that? In fact, let me just leave it open. How would you reply to that question? That some male GPs are just not taking it seriously?
You know, I think, sadly, a lot of female GPs don't take it seriously either. However, I hope that the tide is changing with, the newer generation of GPs coming through. I think that just may be a reflection of their own feeling of being a little bit uncomfortable about dealing with the menopause. I think male GPs tend to shy away from anything female related, which is definitely changing. The landscape is changing, but I think it reflects their own possibly lack of knowledge and lack of understanding. And they tend to say, why don't you make an appointment to see Dr. Ahmed, which is annoying. But I think it reflects their own insecurities and their own lack of understanding. It's not right.
What is the earliest a woman can start the menopause, Dr. Ahmed? What is the earliest?
Well, there's some women who go through premature menopause brought on by, treatments for cancer, from surgery. So I've had a woman who's gone through the menopause at 22, sadly. But I would say, I don't like saying naturally, because that sounds horrible, but, biologically speaking, I would say around, you start getting premenopausal symptoms around the 40s, and about 45, 47, I would say.
So a woman can start the perimenopause in her 30s. In fact, I actually know someone that started her perimenopause, and it must be disconcerting, starting that menopause in your early age. This was another question that came in. Let's just see what this question was that came in from Facebook. They were really, really engaging when it came to me asking the question. So this was another question that came in, and I think she was talking about a taboo subject. She said she has brain fog. So this is the point I wanted to bring up from this point here. She has brain fog, and she feels that she was dumbing down. Is that a definite symptom of the menopause, Dr. Ahmed?
Sadly, yes. It's called different things. Loss of memory, loss of concentration. But brain fog is actually the best way to actually describe how it actually physically feels. It's like that. You walk into a room and you think, I was coming in here for a reason. I'm not quite sure what it was, and it's so annoying. And you find that you forget people's names, and you forget directions, and it's really frustrating. And yes, absolutely, it's like a fog. I don't know what Marilyn and Connie think.
Connie, is there a remedy? Because from what I'm gathering, when it comes to herbal remedies, there's no one panacea for all the symptoms. There are different herbal remedies. And just a correction, I know we talk about hot flushes, but from my reading, it's called hot flashes, not hot flushes. When it comes to memory, I don't know if St. John's wort is something, but if someone was suffering from that kind of brain fog, is there a particular herbal remedy you might recommend her to try?
Vitamins, vitamin C and vitamin E, they help with the memory part. So I would recommend that. And basically, I would say don't beat yourself up about it. My grandma always used to laugh at herself. what could she do? She would go into a room, as you said, Dr. Ahmed, you go into a room and you think, I know I'm in here for a reason, but then she would just laugh about it and, get on with her day. But yeah, vitamins E and C are very good for the memory.
Marilyn, have you ever experienced brain fog?
Yeah, I had it for about 5 years, and it was awful. I felt like I was, the way I described it, it was like being a young person trapped in an old person's body, where I could read something 15 or 20 times when I was studying to be an accountant, close the book, go to the bathroom, come back. I could look at that chapter. It's like I've never seen it before. It was just completely gone. And so that is the reason why when I discovered something that turned all of that around for me in a matter of days, I've been teaching that now for the past 18 years. And I'm just sitting from an earlier call. I'm often talking about the brain. So I've got various props that sit on my desk in terms of how do you activate the brain? How do you activate the mind? How do you do that, successfully without the use of a silver pill, as they call it in the Limitless movie. So but the brain fog, as Dr. Ahmed said, it's a really good way to describe it, because that is what it can actually feel like, where there are times I could barely even remember my own name, and somebody be talking to me and just say something as simple as what's on TV tonight. And I've just been reading the TV guide, have no idea, just no idea. So it was fantastic timing that turned that around for me, and for, I've worked with clients with brain damage and all sorts of things over the years. But I'm just also going to go back to the question about the anger thing, and the question about, speaking to GPs who aren't really taking you seriously. First of all, with the GPs, one of the things I always suggest to my clients is write down what you want to say, and just arrive and say, I have a statement, please let me get through it. Don't let them interrupt you either. You just want to, but if you've written it down, you don't have to try and articulate and, oh my God, what was I going to say? Just write what you've written, you read what you've written down. And then when you get to that point, you say, right now, comment, and then you have a pen and paper and you write down the response. You write down what they said, so you've got it as a record if you are going back, let's say, to speak to your partner or your family. And then you can also read what you've written and say, oh, could you just clarify, what did you mean by X, Y, Z? And I found that's a very efficient way to do it. And it's what I did all those years ago when I had the brain fog and had all of these awful symptoms. And the GP was the specialist at, I won't say the hospital, but he was the head of endocrinology, basically sat in front of me and just made some statements which were completely outrageous. Like, I'm bald because your hair grows in cycles. I'm like, why isn't everybody running around bald? So that was that craziness. So write your statements down. And with the anger, one of my favorite things ever, which is going to sound very obvious, is just to breathe. I take a breath and I count to 3 or count to 10, depending on the situation. And I sometimes say to people, give me a moment, because you don't want me to answer in this moment. Trust me when I tell you, give me a second. And I'm going to take a breath and pause. And if I need to, I'm going to take a step back or say, actually, I just need to go and grab some water or go to the bathroom. And then while I'm walking, I'm like, okay, let's breathe. Let me get this in perspective and let me think about what I want to say, so that I don't just come at you with both barrels blazing. So just wanted to speak to those points.
Absolutely, I get that. It from the perspective which on my reading, and it seems as if the most common symptom and the most frustrating is this perspiration, is this hot flush that women go through. And some women have to sleep with fans and the windows open. What is the process that makes that happen, Dr. Ahmed? And what can women do to kind of reduce that, say, outside of hormone replacement? Is there anything you would advise naturally for women to help with this constant hot? I mean, I was talking to a girl once, and within 5 minutes, it was like she was in a shower. What would you advise women to kind of help with this hot flash or hot flush, whatever term you want to use, Dr. Ahmed?
Yeah, I still call it hot flushes, so don't worry. So the reason you get the hot flushes is it's thought to be caused by, again, all to do with the hormone levels, which affect your body temperature control. And they can happen without warning. So the natural things that you can do, obviously, is wearing avoid wearing thin clothing. I mean, I'll be going around in a t-shirt while my family are sitting there shivering. Because it's really awful. And obviously, something as simple as looking at your bed sheets, avoiding things like, silky, satiny, or polyester, and going for cotton. Avoiding things like, caffeine, reducing caffeine, alcohol, reducing, some people find spicy food makes it worse. And again, when you get anxious or stressed, that can make the flushes worse. There's all sorts of things that can do it, but those are the main things that I would look at a woman's life and say, are there things? Another thing that is really useful is keeping a diary. All these sort of things that we're talking about. I encourage my ladies to keep a diary, not only to monitor their cycle, but their mood as well. And I ask them to write down, do they notice a pattern of something emerging that's triggering a mood swing, etc., etc. So those are the things that that you can naturally do to reduce the flushes.
Connie, your thoughts from a plant-based perspective when it comes to reducing the hot flushes?
Yeah, stay away from sugars and stay away from carbs, certain type of carbs. But the thing to help when you have an onset of a flush is the peppermint oil. You could put two drops into a handkerchief or tissue and just breathe that in. Dilute it into some water and just spray when you're having it. And also, just as Marilyn was saying about breathing, just to calm yourself down and understanding what's happening when you're having the hot flush. Because if you let it take you away in the moment, it's not nice for you personally. It's not nice for someone else watching it. But just to do those things, the peppermint oil, to drink peppermint tea, just to cool the body down. And as Dr. Ahmed was saying, that it can just happen out of nowhere. I could get one right now. Should I get one right now? But these things happen, and we're not in control of what's happening, but we can help to reduce it by what we eat. So my advice would be to stay away from sugary things, caffeine and alcohol and so forth, just to let your body do what it can do without the added pressure of those things that can induce a hot flush.
Dr. Ahmed, a couple of other symptoms that were reported in the comments was dry eyes, and one woman described it as electric shocks. I'm trying to imagine how that feels. Are those two common symptoms of the menopause as well, Dr. Ahmed?
I must admit, I've never heard of electric shocks. I'm wondering whether she's describing some sort of tingling or something. And the dry eyes, again, that's not common. You do get dry skin. Dry eyes tend to occur with other conditions. However, I would rule those out first before I would say it's part of the menopause, because I must admit I've never heard of dry eyes. I wouldn't say no, but electric shocks, again, maybe she's just trying to describe, tingling, which you can get, tingling in the menopause. I've heard it a couple of my patients, actually, anecdotally, but it's not a common symptom.
Okay.
I mean, what I would suggest that she does for her dry eyes is I would actually want to see that patient. And she can try, natural things to help lubricate her eyes. And then the tingling, I would want to know, where are you experiencing the tingling? That's the most important thing.
I think what's
I have experienced the electric shocks. You just saying that reminded me. I would go to reach out and touch something, and it would be like the electric shock would just happen. And I'm thinking, is anyone else around me experiencing this? Because I would be at work and no one else was experiencing it, just me. And when I did some research, that is one of the symptoms. What we might be fully charging, but I would get that. I don't get it now, but at the beginning I did get that quite often. So,
yeah.
That Marilyn, have you had anything to do with electric shocks at all in your process?
I have heard about them as one of those, not very common, but something that happens. But one of the things I'd say about, and I call them hot flushes as well, but it is sometimes like a flash or it can come out of nowhere. But one of the things I would say is I've got my, got a little kit, and I actually do make light of it. Actually, I think it's in here. Let me just, oh yeah, there it is. So one of the things that's in the kit.
Oh yes.
Fan.
So I made good use of this summer because we had like 29, 30 degrees here in Hertfordshire, as I'm sure you did in the South London as well. So, that was part of my kit. This, I got this when I took up ballet a few years ago, but that doesn't stop me taking it to Cassiobury Park, when I'm there and sort of, dabbing away. And also one of the things I do, particularly when I'm going to be doing things like this, where I know I'm on camera and I could be on camera sometimes 12 or 15 hours a day, is I'm going to wear things that are more conducive to keeping my temperature under control. So this is a really light fabric. It's almost featherweight. It's cut in a way that isn't restricting to the body. So people probably think, hasn't she got any other clothes? Because they're all a similar style now. Because I find I'm just going to do what I can to help myself. And I know this might sound really out there, but when the hot flushes first started, I was running a lot of webinars. So I've been teaching stuff online and coaching online for 15 years. And I remember I was on camera just about to go live, and it's like the shower thing where I'm soaking wet, and I'm like, I'm going live in a few minutes. And I was like, dear unconscious mind, not now. If you need to do this, please, can we hold off until I'm finished the webinar? I'm not kidding you. In that moment, everything just calmed down. I did the webinar, which was about 3.5 hours. Not a bead of sweat anywhere. Did the whole thing. Wasn't even thinking about it. After the webinar, started sweating again, and I laughed to myself. And I was like, "Did that just happen?" And recently, this summer, I was doing a thing where I was emceeing an event for 2 weeks. So we had 12 days on camera, and I was online from 8:30 in the morning till 11 o'clock at night. And we're beaming around the world, so I'm on camera all day. And I had this conversation. I said, "Dear unconscious mind, got a busy day. I'm with some of the people I really respect and admire, and I don't want to be sitting in front of Greg Braden like sweating buckets. So can we please cool this down and calm this down?" And again, didn't give it a second thought for the entire time. So although
I think you're lucky that your menopause listens to you. It's your
but if we have a stern conversation like, let's not mess about now, it's really weird. But it shouldn't be weird. I'm a hypnotherapist, but it was like, did that just happen? But it's happened so many times now that I'm like, I'm not going to question it. I'm just going to enjoy the results, and also be aware that if my body thinks it needs to do something, I'm like, go ahead and do it. Knock yourself out and let's just get it over with. So
you just had an agreement in the chat. I think Selena just said that she talks to herself as well. Dr. Ahmed, here's a question. We're just going to go to some adverts in a moment. From a cultural perspective, is the menopause seen differently? Because obviously you've seen a diverse range of women. Is there a cultural perspective to how the menopause is perceived and handled, or is it the same across all the cultures that you have noticed?
That's a really good question. I think I would say in sort of my mum's generation, it didn't matter culturally. I think it was just this is part of life. You just get on and deal with it. It was not talked about. It wasn't discussed. The husband would ignore it, thinking she's having one of her moments. And I think in sort of my generation, it's becoming much more open. But culturally is where I still see the difference, in the the Asian community, especially Southeast Asian community, certain Afro-Caribbean communities as well. It's still very much a taboo, and it actually goes on quite nicely to what I was going to talk about. This is something that we haven't touched upon, is the loss of interest in sex, which is sex isn't the problem we talk about in our communities in the best of times, but it is a big thing in menopause. This block that sometimes happens between partners. Obviously, men and women wish to still be physically intimate and share that relationship. And when a woman is starting to feel, just losing the urge to have sex, it can drive a couple to apart. So it's really important, I was talking about from a man's perspective, to try and understand that this isn't because a woman doesn't love her partner anymore. It's because it's sadly a natural process that she has to go through, because she loses that urge. So it's important to communicate, and it's not talked about culturally anyway. So yes, there is definitely a cultural difference.
The issue of sex was going to come up after the break. I was going to go away, do a few adverts, and then come back. There was a couple of sensitive issues around the menopause I was going to bring up. So ladies, if you just excuse me just for 2 minutes, let me just share with the audience some things that are happening later on in the week. And then I think what we can do, we can touch on that issue a little bit more, because it was one of the last few questions I was going to touch on. There's another sensitive one there as well. So if you just give me 5 minutes, so let me just share with you some things that are happening. Look, in this part of the show, I just basically share with you some things that are happening. Really pleased to say that I spoke a little while ago about another course I was doing, and I've completed my diabetes reversal training, and I'll be starting a diabetes reversal coaching very soon. So I just thought I'd share some good news, because I have been sharing my journey with people on this podcast to let you know I've completed this reversal training. Really pleased about that. I want to tell you about Tribe. It's something that I'm so passionate about. This was me at 53. It's not a very nice picture, but this is me at 56 years old, simply through the methodologies that I have done in Tribe. And it works with women as well. And if you want to lose weight, you're aged over 40, and you just want to gain more energy, Tribe is something that can help you. It's a community that I'm building. I'm really passionate about it. You can go and visit the website, and there's a 7-day trial there, absolutely free, a 7-day trial. And when you go there, it's an online program. There is so much. I'm just going to run through it quickly. There's a member dashboard, and there's delicious recipes. There's a big focus on Caribbean recipes. I know Connie spoke about reduced sugar. This will definitely help you in you're managing your menopause, and these are all the features that are there. I mean, it's absolutely wonderful. People are actually loving it. So you can visit Tribe, and there's a big community, and you can try it for 7 days. So if you want to lose weight, reduce your sugar intake, and really just become healthy, go and visit Lean Lifestyle Tribe and join for 7 days, absolutely free. All right. Now, the other thing that you can do, if you go there, you can pick up a meal plan, a free 5-day meal plan, reduce sugar. There's a beautiful recipes like this trout here, jerk chicken with a low carb, sugar-free, jerk-free sauce, and this curry salmon, which is absolutely delicious. These are the recipes. So if you visit leanlifestyletribe.com and register for the mailing list, you get this in your inbox absolutely free. All right. Beautiful 5-day recipes. Go there and take a look at it now. After the show, every single Wednesday, I hold another podcast called Lean Bites Live. This Wednesday, it's normally at 7 o'clock. This week, it's going to be at 6 p.m. It's going to be 1 hour early, and the topic is going to be about menopause and weight gain. And I'm going to just explain to you how the way I live my life and the diet I have can help you with the weight gain, because obviously post-menopause is a big issue about weight gain, and we're going to talk about that in the show as well. So this will be on Wednesday, 6 o'clock. If you subscribe to the channel, then you'll get notified about that. And every week I have a podcast. So next week, Monday, I have the Speaker with Orange Tie, Steve Beckles. He'll be on the podcast next week. A fantastic guy. We're going to be talking about mindset, motivation, goal setting for the new year. Don't miss it next week. And yes, you're going to have a chance to ask questions in a moment. Just if you're watching us on YouTube, just subscribe so you can know everything that we're doing in the future. All right. So here's the question. This is the question that I kind of a little bit more of a sensitive question. What happens what can help women who suffer from vaginal dryness because of the menopause? And let me just go to Dr. Ahmed first, and then we can just go to Connie, and if Marilyn wants to put her 2 pence in, then Marilyn, you're there. So Dr. Ahmed, vaginal dryness is something that happens to so many women when in the menopause, and we were talking about the sexual aspects we're going to go into afterwards. What can a woman do who is suffering? Because it must be such a psychological issue for a woman for that to happen. What would your advice be to them, Dr. Ahmed?
So obviously, if a woman is experiencing vaginal dryness, she needs to be examined to make sure there's nothing else going on. It is part of the menopause. There are other things that can cause vaginal dryness, so that's another reason why it's important to see the GP. So obviously, if you're experiencing vaginal dryness, it's very difficult for you to be aroused, for sex as well. What you can do is, the things you can do with your lifestyle. So, don't use things like perfume soaps and washes around that area. Don't put perfume lotions and creams down there either. It's very important that, I would advise women to just, wash with water. You can get lubricants over the counter to help with vaginal dryness and avoid perfume soaps. Like I said, you can get unperfumed soaps. The best thing to do is just use water. And those are the things that I would first recommend. If it's very severe, you can use estrogen cream or pessaries as well. But, another thing that you can do is, you need to explain this to your partner if it's causing a problem. And those are the main things that I would recommend.
Okay. Thank you for that. I'm going to go to Connie and ask you, your experience, well, outside of that. But if you do have a question, please, for Dr. Ahmed, for Connie, Marilyn, please put it in the chat, and I will try and give it to them at this point. So if you have a question you want to ask, this is your time to go to the chat and put that in, so I can put that. It's an issue. It's a sensitive issue, and I left those sensitive issues. But is there an alternative or a natural or plant-based way to be able to deal with the vaginal dryness that happens through menopause, Connie?
Yeah, research has shown that vitamin D helps with that, and also vitamin E, and making sure that you're topped up on especially vitamin D and K2, especially for darker skinned people, and having that abundance basically in your life. The sun's going down quicker. If you can get that natural sunlight, brilliant. But research is showing that vitamin D3 is the way that to avoid or to help ease the symptoms of vaginal dryness. Your partners can help you by being affectionate, being loving, understanding. They know what rocks your boat, so they can help you with that. So yeah, it is something. Dr. Ahmed was saying about not to use perfume products. You could also use vinegar. Just put 2 capsules into water and use it to wash down that area, just to get the balance right, because people may think it should be pH 7, but it's not. I think the vagina should be 4.2. So using perfumes and things like that down there is not going to help. So yeah, but again, going back to your diet and, as I say, embracing what's happening to you. But one of the partners, though, can speak to the partners.
I hear you. I hear you on that one. I've got a couple of questions. Marilyn, was there a comment you wanted to make on that vaginal dryness issue, or should we move on to a couple of questions I've had?
I think I'll just reiterate what both Dr. Ahmed and Connie said, particularly about speaking with your partner. And it's actually useful because the last person I dated actually knew about it. It's one of the questions he asked me. And I was like, that's a bit of a weird question. Do you suffer from vaginal dryness? Because I said about the hot flushes and menopause, etc. And he actually asked the question. So after the whoa, okay, never been asked that before. It's like, well, it makes sense. You just told him about the hot flushes. So I would definitely say being open and having conversations about it. And it may also be that you might have to be a little bit more creative in what you're doing with regards to your partner. But as Connie has put it, they know what rocks your boat. And if they don't, then this is an opportunity to really talk about it and to see how you can enhance what you're doing and maybe change things up. But I'd definitely say dialogue, I'd say, is a big part of it as well, not trying to hide it away.
Okay, fantastic. I mean, there was a question coming in about diet, and I think that Connie alluded to that. So definitely, when it comes to diet, if you change your diet, it can definitely help. And that my research told me that as well. Again, sugar and hyperinsulinemia. Hyperinsulinemia is a high blood sugar. And that causes sugar cravings, and again, and when you're suffering from diabetes and the menopause, it's an exacerbated state. So definitely diet. But there was a question, Dr. Ahmed, does a woman on the menopause have to look at exercise in a different way?
No, not really. I think, if you're going through the menopause, I know that I was actually reading about the effects the menopause has on the breasts, and they were discussing, for instance, doing upper body strengthening exercises and weights. You don't have to be careful or avoid anything at all for exercise. In fact, the more you do, it'll be better for you in numerous ways. Your mood will be elevated. Your musculoskeletal strength will increase. It will help reduce your risk of various diseases as well. But no, you don't have to do any restrictions per se for exercise. In fact, it's actively encouraged. So yeah.
For me, I looked into it, and there was something called estrogen dominance, which is obviously the progesterone goes down, and when the progesterone goes down, there's obviously a greater risk of osteoporosis, which is another concern with women on their menopause. So I would be guessing that strength training may help a little bit when they're on the menopause. What would you say to that, Dr. Ahmed?
Yeah, not osteoporosis is one of the the effects of going through the menopause, because you don't have that protective effect of estrogen and progesterone. Not all women who go through the menopause go on to get osteoporosis, but you can do things. I mean, Connie will back me up here. Increasing your calcium and vitamin D intake is absolutely essential. So another thing I tell my patients to do is take a calcium and vitamin D supplement, or even better, sit in the sun with sunscreen. I've not heard of what you've discussed. I will look into it. But another exercise that women must also do is their pelvic floor exercises, which is often forgotten. Because another thing that obviously women with the menopause can go through is bladder issues with incontinence as well, which is a whole another talk. So it's important to strengthen every muscle in our body.
So let's move on to the question that you raised just before, and this came in from Facebook, and the comment, the point I want to read, it says, some women say it never gets away totally. Look at the name Menopause. Apparently that's not true. I still have friends who are sexually active after. So I suppose that comes back to your point, whereby whether it's a misconception that your sex drive decreases. The question I would like, is it a question of, does it decrease during or possibly during after? Marilyn, I'm going to come to you and ask you your thoughts, or whether your fears around your sex drive, your menopause affecting your sex drive.
Do you know, it's a weird one. I haven't actually really thought about it. And I'm, you know, when you're saying before, during, I'm like, we'll have to ask me in a few years once I'm beyond it, because I think I'm probably 2 years into it now, and I hope I'm getting to the end of that phase. So I have to say it's not something I've thought about, but maybe because it hasn't impacted me, I haven't had to give it huge amounts of thought. So I'm hoping that it's again, everybody doesn't get every symptom. So in my case, I'm like, oh, I hope I've kind of, you know, bypassed that one and I'm absolutely fine, but I certainly have to give it some thought should it ever come to pass. But it hasn't impacted me as yet, so haven't given it a massive amount of thought.
So Dr. Ahmed, is it, this is the sex drive is obviously a definite issue. Is it during the menopause or after the menopause where commonly women have seen where their sex drive potentially may have reduced?
You start noticing a difference in the perimenopausal period. It doesn't, you know, switch off like that, but it tends to be much worse in the actual menopause. So when you've actually gone through it officially. But I think it's interesting what Marilyn has said, actually, because I think before women would just quietly put up with it. And I think what's happening now is that women are becoming much more empowered in voice and have more of a voice. So they feel, no, I'm not gonna put up with this. And I think education has helped because women now understand more, men understand more, and I think because the dialogue is better, and I think because women feel more empowered, they think, hell, I'm not going to put up with this. I'm going to get me some, you know, I'm going to tell my man what I want. So, you know, I think that has helped immensely. I don't know what Marilyn and Connie feel, but I think, you know, as women, we feel more comfortable in discussing things because it is slightly more out there. What do you girls think?
Well, you know, I do appreciate the openness around the issue because you know, if you have that vaginal dryness and you have that loss of sexual appetite, I mean, that definitely can have a knock-on effect on your partner in your life. So, you know, it was a sensitive issue. I did want to leave it to the last part, but yeah, I really appreciate you guys' openness about that. There was a question here. And I'm going to try and read it right. And it was from Alison. It says, is frequent nocturnal mitration a symptom or is it linked to diabetes? I hope I pronounced that right, Alison. I'm not too sure if I pronounced that right, but that was a question if you're not going to make that right. There seems to be a lot of comments coming through, Connie, about the plant-based. People are very, very interested in plant-based. Could you tell me, Connie, I read that soya has a form of estrogen, can produce, it's kind of you can use that to replicate estrogen. Is that correct?
It is correct, but from the research that I've done, I try and avoid soya. If we were looking at the women who created it and were fermenting it as they used to do in the olden days, then it would be fine. But because it's so man-made, in quotes, and I personally steer away from that soya. And then there's other things that you can help boost your estrogen levels, or in some cases we have too much estrogen with regards to the, you know, things being in plastic, and those things do mimic estrogen. You know, microwaving food in the microwave and things like that, warming them up in the microwave, all those things, the BPAs seep into our system, and that causes an imbalance there as well. But with regards to soya, I personally stay away from it because I think, Dr. Ahmed, you might know about this with soya and the link to breast cancer and so forth. But yeah, I personally stay away from that.
Great. Thank you very much. We have one more question, and I know we're going to leave with some tips or advice. Someone just said they use coconut. We've spoken a lot about the perimenopause. We've spoken about the premenopause. We've spoken a lot about the menopause itself. But there's also an issue of the postmenopause, and one of the biggest issues in the postmenopause for women is weight gain. it has got to be so frustrating for women going through that menopause and then putting on weight. Dr. Ahmed, what are the reasons why post-menopause women put on excessive amounts of weight?
I'm going to be really honest. I think, women tend to put on a weight because of its fluid retention, and they tend to get it around the central aspect of it. However, I think with increasing knowledge and increasing, dietary, especially women who are, that we know so much more about diet and lifestyle, I'm actually seeing it much less as an issue, weight gain, postmenopausal weight gain. And I have a lot of patients who actually say they're actually fitter and healthier than they were when they were young, because I think they realize that they have to make those changes now. It's sort of like a wake-up call. So the reason weight gain is an issue is because of the fluid retention, again, hormonal related, tends to be central. And, I think, I'm sure Marilyn and Connie will advise more about things like diet and lifestyle and, mindset changes as well.
This show, we normally take about an hour, but because the subject is such a deep subject, I thought I'd go on for at least another half an hour or so, because it's such a varied subject, and we could only touch on so much. I mean, we can only really touch, and for me, I have learned so much, and I really thank you for allowing me to be part of this women's room with this real subject, and I really appreciate your openness about the subject, because I'm sure people listening would have gained some benefits and some insight into what is generally a very, very sensitive issue. With some parting thoughts at the moment, if you was to leave the audience with some parting thoughts, what thoughts would there be? And let me go to Marilyn first. I come to you, Connie, next, and then I come to Dr. Ahmed last. If you was to leave the audience watching with some parting thoughts, what would they be, Marilyn?
Couple of things with regards to the brain fog, because that was an awful time. So I really feel for people who are going through it. One of the things I would say is pay attention to how you think about your memory and how you speak to your mind. Because I know it sounds like linguistics and semantics, but when you say, oh, I always forget, I forgot why I came into the room, it's almost like a suggestion. And the more you think about forgetting, the more you will forget. So I'd say you want to make some little changes there in terms of setting your mind to remembering and also giving yourself time, because one of the things that happens when you're under pressure and when you're under stress, you actually can't think straight. So we're back to that whole thing. We'll take a moment, get yourself into that expansive state. That is kind of what we call step one of the photo reading, the accelerated learning thing. But part of it is you relax the breathing, you get into what you call expanded awareness, because that's going to give you better left and right brain integration. So you've got the logic and the creative, and then your focus is on what do you actually want to remember. And that will then set off a chain of events, which can then start kind of moving in that particular way and space. So I'd say that with regards to the mindset, and with regards to just generally speaking, I would definitely say speak to the people that you care about, so they have an appreciation of what's going on. Don't sweep it under the carpet and make it a taboo subject, because it's really one of those things about bodily functions. And I know that we're a bit weird as humans about our bodily functions. So I'd say be open and upfront about that. And also the breathing thing, I'd say, is really, really key. And also noticing if there, and Dr. Ahmed has touched on it already, in terms of are there patterns and are there triggers and are things worse at particular times? Because when you get a sense of, okay, I've been going through that, and now I've noticed that when I do that, this happens, I think that's a big part of it. But I'd say losing the embarrassment and the stigma around it is a really big piece of the puzzle as well.
Thank you very much for that, Marilyn. Marilyn, if people watching wanted to get hold of you, how would they be able to do that, please?
Two ways. Easiest way on social media, as you can see on the screen, it's Marilyn Devonish. The only place that's different is Instagram, where it's the NeroSuccess Coach. And my main website is www.transformationstm.com. I'll spell it. It's TRANCE, as in hypnotic trance, and then F for Freddy, so FORMATIONS, TM as in trademark, so transformationstm.com. That's the easiest way to find me.
Thank you very much, Marilyn. Connie, some parting thoughts. Fantastic. All of them, in fact, absolutely wonderful. Very open. Some parting thoughts for anybody watching at this moment.
Yeah, it's been a brilliant discussion, and it's an eye-opener with the different perspectives that everybody's bringing to the table. And my parting thoughts would be just to have a look at food in a different way. That food is a healing source, that what we put in our body, what we digest, what we absorb, can help us through this period. Communication, as Marilyn says, and Dr. Ahmed said, communicate with those around you, your loved ones. Get together with some girlfriends so that you know that you're not on your own. Try something different with regards to the vitamins, essential oils, just something different. And it's not one all that fits all. So don't be down on yourself if you've tried something, it didn't work, you tried to do the breathing, it didn't work. Don't be down on yourself. It's not one size fits all. So embracing what you're going through now, thinking that it's something that we all go through. Some symptoms are different, but we can get through it. And that's my advice. And just looking at what you're eating, stay away from the sugars, stay away from alcohol, because it can exacerbate the symptoms. But yeah, it's a good discussion. Well
done. And people want to get hold of you, Connie. What's the best way to get hold of you?
Yeah, my website is www.resetme.co.uk, and I've just got a little treat that if anybody wants to log on, they can download the vitamins that I recommend and so much more. So if they want to go, they can get that there. So www.resetme.co.uk.
Thank you very much, Connie. And Dr. Ahmed, wonderful. Really appreciate you being on here. You've given a great medical perspective on the matter. Very, very valid. Some grounded conversation. Some parting thoughts for anybody that is watching.
So I'd like to first say thank you for inviting me, and I've learned a lot from you, Connie and Marilyn, and I'm fascinated by some of the stuff you said, so I'm definitely going to be looking up essential oils, definitely. I think what I'd like to say to anyone out there is you're not alone. You're definitely not alone, and don't feel scared of seeing your GP. We're really not that scary. And I think a lot of people feel that if they're going to see the doctor, they're just going to be given tablets and fobbed off. I'd like to reassure you that that isn't the case. And if you do feel unheard by your GP, you're more than entitled to seeing somebody else, because you're perfectly within your right to be heard. And I would definitely, like Connie and Marilyn have said, write down all the questions you want to ask your GP. It makes it much more productive of a consultation. So write everything down. Go onto reputable websites. That's another thing I would say. Use for instance, the NHS website or WebMD, it's reputable websites, because there's a lot of misinformation out there. Yeah, that's it basically.
And if someone wanted to get hold of yourself and follow what you do, because I know you're on social media, how would someone be able to reach?
That's how Ken and I connected, actually. So I'm quite new to social media. So I'm actually on Instagram, and if I'll be happy to answer any questions. I'm at Mum and Medic. It's as simple as that.
Well, what I will do is I will put everybody's contact details in the YouTube description. So once the show's finished, some point by tomorrow, there will be everybody's website in the YouTube. So if you go to the YouTube link and just look in the description, I'll have everybody's contact details there. So there's complete clarity. Marilyn, Connie, and Dr. Andleeb, I really appreciate allowing me to be the honorary guest today in the women's room. It's been a fascinating discussion, and what's beautiful is that you guys have been very, very open and very, very real. I'm sure you've added some value to a number of people. So I really, really appreciate you guys taking your time out to be with me today. I really do. And some people have asked for another one. So hope maybe at some point you may be able to come at this again, because it's such a vast subject and we can only touch some of it. So Marilyn Devonish, Connie Cowans, Dr. Andleeb Ahmed, I appreciate all three of you. Thank you very much for sharing your journey with me. I will speak to you three in the green room in about 2 minutes. So I will come back to speak to you, but I really appreciate your time in the Make Health Your Habit Live. Ladies and gentlemen, that was an absolutely fascinating show for me as a man. I have gained some understanding, and I hope if there are men watching this show that they have also gained some understanding. The menopause is real. The symptoms are real. The women in your life, in our life, they go through enough as it is, and for us to disregard this, the symptoms and the menopause is just psychosomatic, is completely, I think, unfair and unappreciated and disrespectful. These women go through some serious issues, and I think if you have watched the show, you'll have a better understanding of how you can support them through that process. And everybody who's joined me today, thank you. I know the show's normally an hour. You've stayed on the show for an hour and 45 minutes. I really do appreciate that. Thank you very much for being with me this time. I'll be back next week, Monday, with Speaker with the Orange Tie. I'll be here Wednesday at 6 o'clock. Menopause and weight gain. We'll just be talking about the two of the holes, estrogen and progesterone, and how that puts on weight post-menopause. Very, very short show, but you could just subscribe and you'll find out all about that. Listen, as I say all the time, there are so many habits that you could develop, but I think the best habit you could have is to actually make health your habit. Listen, I'll see you next week. Bye for now.
Thanks for listening to the Make Health Your Habit podcast live show. Remember, the views and opinions expressed during the show represent those of our guest and host alone. We hope you enjoyed the show.